I wasn't invited to the table, and that was the moment I realized just how much power they thought they could take from me. My name is Olivia Mercer, and for 8 years, I'd been the backbone of Grant & Hawthorne, a high-stakes marketing firm where connections mattered more than creativity. I wasn't the face in glossy magazines, nor the one shaking hands with clients over champagne, but I was the one who made the campaigns work. I was the strategist behind the firm's biggest wins. I made the numbers dance, the campaigns soar, and the partners look like geniuses. And among those partners, there was one I trusted above all, David Grant. Charismatic, brilliant, and impossibly persuasive, David had taken me under his wing from the first day I walked into the office. He called me his right hand, his secret weapon, the one who turned his ideas into reality. Together, we had climbed the ladder, building projects, pitching clients, and celebrating victories, always side by side. Or so I thought. The first crack came subtly. Invitations to key meetings started arriving late, or not at all. My name, once at the top of every email thread, began disappearing. Achievements I'd worked on tirelessly were being presented as David's own. At first, I told myself it was coincidence, oversight, nothing to take personally. After all, I valued loyalty, and I believed in the people I trusted. But the final straw came during the announcement of a major merger, the kind of deal that could define careers. I walked into the conference room expecting my usual seat at the head, only to find David smiling at a room full of investors, with Ethan and Claire, 2 junior partners, on either side of him. My chair was empty. My name was never mentioned. My contributions? Completely erased. I froze for a moment, staring at the polished table that had once been our shared battlefield of ideas. The realization hit like a punch. I had been deliberately excluded, sidelined, invisible. And worse, it wasn't just oversight, it was strategic. They wanted me out, or at least they thought they could make me irrelevant. As I walked out of that room, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the empty hallway, I felt something shift inside me. Anger? Yes. Shock? Certainly. But also a flicker of something darker, something sharper. Because if they thought leaving me out would silence me, if they thought erasing my place at the table would erase me entirely, they were about to learn one thing: when pushed too far, I don't sit quietly. I flipped the whole table over. And in that quiet, empty hallway, I made a decision. They had underestimated me. And underestimation, I knew, was a dangerous mistake. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe David had just made an innocent decision. Maybe the merger meeting had been a scheduling conflict. Maybe, no, the truth was harder to swallow. The signs began to pile up, subtle but persistent. Emails I had once received promptly were now redirected, left in the void of an all-staff folder I wasn't copied on. My ideas, carefully drafted over nights of effort, started appearing in presentations, but attributed to someone else. Even my office seemed to conspire against me. My inbox occasionally emptied overnight, files misplaced on shared drives, phone messages that vanished without a trace. I noticed the favoritism too. Ethan and Claire, the partners who had stood beside David at the table, were suddenly the golden children. Their every suggestion was celebrated. Every error of mine was questioned, scrutinized, sometimes dismissed outright. During casual team lunches, I caught glances exchanged over my shoulder, hushed laughter that stopped the moment I arrived. People I had once considered allies now avoided eye contact, as if acknowledging my presence might make them complicit. Even David's behavior started to shift. He remained charming, polite, almost fatherly in public, but in private, there was a new distance. Conversations I once had over coffee now ended abruptly. He offered vague praise, a quick smile, and moved on. Something about it felt rehearsed, calculated. And every time I tried to address it, he waved off my concerns with a laugh. "Olivia, you're imagining things." Don't let stress get to you. I began doubting myself. Maybe I was seeing patterns where none existed. But deep down, my gut refused to lie. Something was off. Something deliberate. And that realization gnawed at me, consuming my focus, leaving my sleep fragmented and my mind restless. Late one evening, I stayed behind to review campaign drafts. That's when I noticed it, a subtle alteration in the client reports I had meticulously prepared. Numbers shifted ever so slightly, references changed, and the drafts were already sent to the client under someone else's name. It wasn't a mistake. It was a warning, a demonstration of power. I left the office that night with a lump in my throat and an ache in my chest. Each passing day, the small betrayals mounted, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. The question that burned in my mind was no longer if they intended to sideline me, but why and how far they were willing to go. And as I walked past the conference room, the same table where I had been excluded, I glimpsed David laughing with Ethan and Claire, completely at ease, completely confident. A chill ran down my spine. Because they weren't just ignoring me. They were plotting. And I was right in the middle of it. It hit me all at once, the cold, brutal truth I had been sensing for weeks. David and the partners hadn't just excluded me from a meeting. They hadn't merely minimized my contributions or rewritten history to make someone else shine. They had actively conspired to erase me from the company I helped build, and in doing so, they had jeopardized everything I had worked for. The confirmation came in the form of an email accidentally sent to the wrong inbox, an internal memo titled Final Transition Plan, Olivia Mercer. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. There it was, laid bare. My position was being eliminated, my responsibilities reassigned to Ethan and Claire, my access to client accounts revoked, and my name deliberately stripped from all ongoing projects. Financial approvals I had signed were being audited and reassigned, making me look negligent if anyone traced the numbers back. I staggered back from my desk, staring at the screen as anger and disbelief collided in my chest. Every late night, every crisis I had averted, every client pitch I had crafted, it was all being rewritten as if I had never existed. My reputation, my career, my future in the company, all dangling by a thread David and his cohorts were ready to sever. The betrayal cut deeper than the professional ramifications. I had trusted David, confided in him, even defended him when others questioned his decisions. He had been a mentor, a friend, someone I believed had my back. And now he had weaponized that trust against me, meticulously orchestrating my exclusion while maintaining his flawless public image. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a sharp, burning anger. My hands shook as I scrolled through the memo, the audacity of it searing into my mind. How dare they think they could remove me quietly, rewriting the story as they pleased? How dare they underestimate the person they had pushed aside? The office suddenly felt smaller, suffocating, every whisper and glance confirming what I already knew. They weren't just ignoring me, they were plotting my downfall. And I, who had once been their most loyal ally, had become the target of their ambition. I sank into my chair, my head in my hands, a storm of heartbreak and fury swirling inside me. The betrayal wasn't abstract, it was tangible, documented, undeniable. I had been deliberately sidelined, my influence stripped, my achievements stolen, my career sabotaged. And yet, beneath the despair, a single thought took root, a seed of defiance that would not be silenced. If they thought pushing me out would destroy me, they had miscalculated. They had left me with one thing they could never take, the knowledge of every weakness, every hidden misstep, every secret they thought buried. I looked up, eyes burning with resolve, and whispered to myself, they may have taken my seat at the table, but they have no idea what happens when I flip it over. The first few nights after discovering the memo, I barely slept. My apartment, once a refuge, felt like a cage. I replayed every conversation, every decision, every smile I had trusted, trying to pinpoint the moment they had turned on me. Despair threatened to swallow me whole, But somewhere beneath the exhaustion, anger simmered, sharp, relentless, impossible to ignore. It wasn't until I went through the client files that the spark ignited. One folder, buried beneath innocuous project briefs, revealed the extent of their audacity. Emails had been altered, client accounts reassigned, and budgets quietly diverted. Every trace of my work had been rewritten to credit Ethan and Claire. And yet, a single overlooked detail, a timestamp on a file, a digital signature, reminded me that their house of cards had cracks. The realization hit me like a jolt. If they were this careless in erasing me, they had left themselves exposed. Their arrogance was their weakness, and I held the key. I called Maya, a former colleague who had once warned me about office politics but whom I had dismissed in my ambition. Her expertise in digital forensics was unmatched, and she agreed immediately to help me trace the alterations and uncover proof. Next, I reached out to Ben, a quietly disillusioned partner who had long been uneasy with David's manipulations. With a carefully phrased message, I secured his cooperation. Step by step, a plan began to form, not just to defend myself, but to expose the betrayal in a way that would leave no room for denials. Every report, every client file, every altered contract could be turned against them. And the best part? They wouldn't see it coming. As I worked late into the night, a transformation overtook me. The fear that had weighed so heavily on my chest was replaced by clarity. I wasn't a victim. I was a strategist. Every sleepless hour, every pang of heartbreak, every slight they had inflicted became fuel for the fire that burned within me. I began imagining the moment the truth would surface, David's smug smile faltering, Ethan and Claire scrambling to salvage their stolen glory. I saw the evidence laid bare for everyone to witness, a chain reaction of exposure that would leave them reeling. By the time dawn broke, I wasn't the same Olivia who had walked out of that merger meeting feeling invisible. I was sharper, more focused, and quietly resolute. The betrayal had forged me into someone stronger, someone they would not underestimate again. I closed the last folder, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, they thought erasing me would end everything. They were wrong. The table may have been theirs, but I will decide how it falls. And with that, I made a vow, silent, unyielding, and absolute. I would fight back. Revenge, I learned, isn't a single cinematic moment, it's a sequence of careful moves, each one nudging the opponent closer to collapse. After the awakening, I turned my anger into a method. If David and the partners had carefully erased me, I would do the exact opposite. I would rebuild the truth until it couldn't be ignored. Step 1. Document everything. I started at the edges, old drafts on shared drives, metadata on presentations, timestamps in archived emails. Maya tore through the digital wreckage like a surgeon, recovering deleted versions and exposing edits that proved deliberate attribution. Where files had been overwritten, she reconstructed the history. Where signatures had been reassigned, she traced the chains of custody. Every recovered file became a brick in a wall of proof. Step 2. Assemble allies. I reached out quietly to people who had reasons to be furious. Ben, who had always had doubts but feared rocking the boat, handed over private meeting notes that mentioned transition timelines and reassignments long before I was informed. A junior account manager, fed up with being blamed for mistakes she hadn't made, provided copies of client emails that showed my name as the last trusted contact. Each ally came with risk, and each knew it, but they also knew the cost of silence. Step 3. Bait and timing. David thrived on spectacle, he fed on attention. So I crafted a scenario that would appeal to his vanity, a celebration launch for the new leadership, Ethan's coronation, a press dinner where David would flaunt the firm's future. I let the rumor slip through a controlled channel, a casual mention at a networking event, a planted congratulatory message in an industry forum. Predictably, his calendar filled with rehearsals, interviews, and flashy photo ops. He burned energy on performance instead of scrutiny, the perfect distraction. Step 4. Legal scaffolding. I didn't want a messy social media takedown that could be shrugged off as gossip. Maya's forensic reports were turned into formal exhibits. I walked into a small, discreet law office and handed over the files to a lawyer who agreed to file preservation orders and quietly prepare subpoenas. The goal was a coordinated strike, simultaneous legal action and public exposure so the room for escape would be as small as legally possible. Step 5. Exposure Mechanics. Carla, the investigative journalist I trusted, agreed to hold the story until the legal moves were locked. She planned a timed releases documents, visual proofs, and an explanatory narrative that would make the board's denials impossible. We rehearsed how each piece would land, the email chains first, then the audits, then the client testimony, each layering inevitability. All the while, David lived as if nothing had changed, posting triumph photos, practicing his acceptance speech, basking in the adoration he believed was unassailable. He toasted Ethan as if the future were already his. 2 nights before the planned reveal, we gathered in a dim conference room. The files lay in neat stacks. The subpoenas sat ready. Carla's laptop glowed with the draft story. My hand closed around a small envelope containing a single USB, one final piece of evidence, the keystone. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, my pulse matched the low buzz of the fluorescent lights. I slid the envelope into my pocket, walked to the door, and paused. One step would begin the unmaking. I opened the door, and the elevator chimed. The gala glittered like a promise, the chandeliers casting fractured light over polished floors, the string quartet performing as if nothing had gone wrong. David Grant strode onto the stage, perfect smile in place, unaware that the world he controlled was about to crumble beneath him. The first ripple came when Carla's story went live. Screens across the room flickered, not with the firm's logo, but with the headline, Grant and Hawthorne, The Betrayal Within. The video cut to digital evidence, client emails, altered reports, and time-stamped edits proving that David and his favored partners had deliberately excluded me, rewritten my work, and reassigned my achievements to Ethan and Claire. Gasps swept through the audience. Investors leaned forward. Cameras rolled. Then the legal team moved. Quietly, efficiently, 2 officers served subpoenas and court orders. Bank accounts frozen, records seized, assets flagged. The lights, once warm and celebratory, now felt harsh, exposing every lie. David's smug smile faltered as murmurs rose. He reached for the microphone, but every word sounded hollow. The auditorium held its breath. Maya's forensic analysis flashed on the big screen. Every falsified approval, every misallocated budget, every minor edit designed to erase me now became a confession. Ethan fidgeted, Claire's grin vanished, and David's carefully constructed image cracked. Investors whispered to each other, phones appeared in hands. Social media erupted with clips and commentary, there was no hiding. David tried to deny it. He stumbled over words, insisting mistakes were oversights, blaming junior staff, attempting charm and charm alone. But the evidence was relentless. Each ledger, each signed memo, each email thread pointed directly to him. His empire of influence, built over decades, was unraveling in front of hundreds, and broadcast to thousands more online. Ethan and Claire tried to salvage the night, but their moment of triumph evaporated. Doors opened, investors walked out, cameras followed. Even the press room, once deferential, smelled weakness. David's arrogance had been his greatest blind spot. And then came the final blow, my own name, once erased, now displayed on the main screen. The story framed me not as a victim, but as the strategist who had orchestrated their exposure, a force they underestimated at every turn. The crowd's attention shifted. Recognition, awe, respect, all mine. As David was gently escorted out, cuffed, his eyes meeting mine one last time, I felt no triumphal glee. I didn't need to shout victory. The silence carried it. The room had seen the collapse. The world had witnessed it. And I stood there, composed, unbowed, untouchable. They had wanted me gone. They had believed they could erase me quietly, without consequence. Instead, their ambition had flipped the table entirely, and I had been the one holding it. I stepped away from the chaos, shoulders straight, eyes steady. I didn't look back. The stage was mine, not for applause, but for truth delivered, justice executed, and power reclaimed. The table had been theirs. I had flipped it. And now, nothing could put it back. The days after the gala passed in a surreal blur. Headlines screamed David Grant's downfall, empire collapses overnight, partners betrayed, millions mismanaged. The firm scrambled to salvage credibility, but there was no salvaging what had already been exposed. Every account frozen, every transfer traced, every fraudulent approval laid bare. David's legacy, the carefully polished image of brilliance and charm, was gone, replaced by scandal and disgrace. Ethan and Claire disappeared from the industry almost as quickly as they had risen. Investors pulled back, clients left, and the board disbanded. The world finally understood the depth of the betrayal they had orchestrated. The men and women who had thought me irrelevant, expendable, invisible, were now the cautionary tale everyone whispered about. As for me, the story was different. My reputation, once shadowed by their manipulations, was restored and even strengthened. Recognition came not just from surviving the betrayal, but from exposing it with precision. Former colleagues who had doubted me now sought my counsel. I returned to work not as a subordinate or secret weapon, but as a strategist with power, influence, and unshakable respect. I wasn't celebrating. Justice didn't need fireworks. The satisfaction came in quiet victories. The knowledge that David's arrogance, the very trait that had allowed him to erase me, was also the trait that had guaranteed his ruin. I had been pushed out, underestimated, and betrayed, but the consequence was his undoing. Even outside the boardroom, life felt sharper, cleaner. I slept soundly again, walked with confidence, and spoke with authority. Betrayal had tried to break me, but it had only forged me stronger. Maya, Ben, and Carla, all who had stood with me in secrecy, had their own vindication. Allies once hesitant now had proof that integrity could outmaneuver deceit, and that courage paired with strategy was unstoppable. And then came the poetic justice, quiet yet chilling. The hands that tried to push me away were the same hands that fumbled the very table they built. I wasn't just back, I was the force that made them fall. So now, to you watching this story unfold, have you ever been pushed aside, ignored, or betrayed by someone you trusted? How did you respond? Share your experiences in the comments. I want to hear them. And if you want more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served with precision, hit that subscribe button, because the table will always turn for those who refuse to stay seated.